I drove 8 hours through a storm to surprise my daughter at her baby shower, carrying a gift that symbolized everything I hoped for our future. But when I walked in, the last thing I expected to hear was her laughing with her husband, wishing me dead, just to get a weekend without me. That was the moment I knew something had to change. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the hardest thing to do is walk away from the people you love the most, and how, in the end, it was the best thing I ever did. My name is Helen Brooks. I'm 62 years old, a widow for the past 6 years, and the proud grandmother of two. I've lived in a modest but cozy house in Dayton for as long as I can remember. Life's been hard at times, but I've always gotten by. I used to be an accountant, now retired, spending my days baking pies, knitting blankets, and volunteering at the local senior center. When you get to my age, you start thinking more about the things that matter: family, love, and a little peace. Unfortunately, peace was hard to come by when it came to my daughter, Sara. Sara was my only child, and like most mothers, I adored her from the moment I found out I was pregnant. I worked tirelessly to provide for her, to make sure she had every opportunity in life. But as the years went on, things started to change. Our relationship, once full of laughter and shared moments, began to strain. She grew distant, and I felt it in my bones. We'd still talk on the phone, and I would send her care packages, cookies, scarves, little things to let her know I was thinking of her. But those calls started to feel more like obligations than genuine conversations, and the visits became fewer and farther between. The cracks in our relationship started to widen after she married Tom, a man I wasn't sure I'd ever like. He seemed nice enough at first, but it didn't take long for me to realize that he wasn't as interested in keeping the family close as I had hoped. He didn't discourage Sara from distancing herself from me, and soon I found myself questioning whether he was part of the reason I'd been pushed so far out of her life. So, when Sara called me last month, inviting me to her baby shower, I felt a mixture of excitement and dread. It had been over a year since I'd seen her in person, and though I knew she was pregnant, I hadn't been involved in any of the preparations. I wasn't sure if I was invited out of obligation or if she genuinely wanted me there. Either way, I'd be damned if I let her have a child without knowing how much I loved her and how much I wanted to be there for my grandbaby. I didn't give it a second thought. I went out and bought the most beautiful gift I could afford. It was a vintage crib, one I found at a local antique store, painted a soft cream color with carvings that had been made by a craftsman who had long since passed away. I knew it would be perfect for the baby. After all, this wasn't just any baby. It was the grandchild I had been waiting for, the little one who might bridge the gap between Sara and me. I wanted it to be special. When the day of the baby shower finally arrived, I dressed up as best as I could. I hadn't been out much recently, and I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting my cardigan and fixing my hair, something I hadn't bothered to do in months. I was determined to look my best for my daughter's big day. I couldn't let her see the woman who'd been hurt for so long. I needed to show her that I was still strong, still her mother, and that nothing could take away the love I had for her. The baby shower was held at their home, a large, modern house on the outskirts of town. It looked nothing like the cozy little place I raised Sara in. The moment I stepped inside, I could feel the distance between us. The decor was sleek and stylish, but there was a coldness to it, as if everything was in its place, but no warmth was truly welcome. I put on my best smile, though my heart was already heavy. The room was full of Sara's friends, most of whom I didn't know. I nodded at a few familiar faces, but there was no warmth in their greetings, just polite smiles. I stood by the door for a moment, unsure of where to go, feeling like I didn't belong. Sara spotted me almost immediately, and her face lit up. I could tell she was trying to be enthusiastic, but her eyes were distant, and the way she greeted me felt forced. "Mom, I'm so glad you could make it," she said, but her voice lacked the genuine warmth I remembered from our past. I hugged her, squeezing a little tighter than usual, hoping she'd feel the love in that embrace. I wanted her to know that no matter how much time had passed or how much had changed, I was still her mother, still here. The first few minutes were fine. I mingled, smiled, and played the role of the supportive mother. I talked to a few people, tried to find common ground, but all I could think about was how much I missed the closeness Sara and I used to share. It wasn't just the distance that hurt. It was the emotional void that had come to define our relationship. As I was standing in the corner of the room, the gift in my hands, I overheard a conversation. A few women were chatting near the food table, and I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words that reached my ears cut me deep. Sara's voice, though muffled, was unmistakable. "I really didn't want her here," she said. "But I had to invite her. She'd never let me live it down." The words hit me like a slap to the face. She didn't want me there. I was an obligation, nothing more. My heart sank, and for the first time that day, I felt the weight of everything, her distance, the coldness, and the manipulation, crash down on me. I took a deep breath, holding back tears, but the sting didn't go away. I had spent so many years trying to hold on to the relationship, to nurture the love I thought we still shared, but it was all a lie. It wasn't just that she didn't want me at the baby shower. She didn't want me in her life at all. That's when I made a decision. The gift I'd brought, the vintage crib I had spent weeks searching for, the one I thought would bring us closer, wasn't going to her, not anymore. I was done being used, done being the mother who bent over backward for a daughter who could barely spare a thought for me. I walked straight to the gift table, placed the crib down with a soft thud, and turned to leave. I couldn't stay another minute in that house, surrounded by people who didn't understand the pain I was feeling, least of all the daughter who had once been my whole world. Sara, caught off guard, called out to me, "Mom, what's wrong?" But I didn't turn around. I didn't have the energy to explain. I had given her everything I had for so many years, and now, for the first time, I was walking away. The door slammed behind me as I left, the sound echoing in the emptiness of the house. The drive home was a blur of emotions. The rain had started to fall just as I pulled out of the driveway. I don't know if it was the storm outside or the storm inside me that made the road seem so dark and endless. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white from the tension. My chest felt tight, and the sting of Sara's words kept repeating in my mind. "I really didn't want her here," she had said. Those words felt like a betrayal I couldn't wash away, no matter how hard I tried. I had always thought that, deep down, no matter what happened, Sara would love me. She was my daughter, after all. We'd been through so much together. I had been there for her through every scraped knee, every broken heart, every milestone. I had given up so much of myself just to make sure she had everything she needed, but now it felt like none of that mattered. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to focus on the familiar streets, but it felt different now. Every turn felt like a reminder of how much I had sacrificed for a relationship that had turned into nothing but an obligation for her. She had never asked me how I was doing, never cared about my life, my health, or anything beyond what I could give her. It was as though I had become nothing more than a tool to her, a tool she'd only call upon when she needed something. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, the engine idling, the rain beating against the windshield. My heart was racing and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I had just left my daughter's baby shower, a day I should have felt joy and excitement for, but instead I felt emptier than I'd ever felt before. The crib that had been meant to bridge the gap between us now sat abandoned on her gift table, a symbol of everything I had hoped for and everything I had lost. I stepped out of the car and walked into the house, the door clicking shut behind me. The silence in my home was suffocating. It had been my sanctuary, my refuge after Harold passed, but now, even my home felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something I wasn't sure I could give. I threw my purse onto the kitchen counter and sank into a chair at the table, staring at nothing. The sound of the rain outside was the only thing that filled the emptiness, and even that felt like a reminder of how alone I was. The phone rang a few times, but I didn't pick it up. I knew it was Sara. I knew she would call, just like she always did when things were uncomfortable between us. But I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. I needed time. Time to figure out what had just happened and what I was supposed to do next. I had always believed that a mother's love was unconditional. I had believed that no matter how far we drifted, how much time passed, my daughter would always love me, always come back to me. But that wasn't what had happened. She hadn't just rejected me. She had rejected everything I had done for her, every sacrifice, every moment of love I had given her. And for what? Because I didn't fit into the life she wanted to build for herself? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had spent years bending myself to her whims, accommodating her needs while sacrificing my own. I had always put her first, always made her feel like she was the center of my world. But now it was clear to me that I wasn't the center of hers. I was just a supporting character in a life that didn't have room for me anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed Theta's number. Theta was my oldest friend, the one person who had seen me through everything. She was the one who had been there when Harold died, the one who had helped me sort through his things and stayed up late talking about everything we had lost. Theta would understand. She always did. "Helen?" she answered, her voice a comforting presence in the darkness. "What's going on? I've been trying to call you." I could hear the concern in her voice, and for a moment I thought about telling her everything. I thought about pouring out the pain I was feeling, the betrayal, the loss. But instead, I found myself shaking my head, even though she couldn't see it. "I don't know, Theta," I said softly. I don't know what to do anymore." "About what?" She pressed gently. "What's happened?" I sat back in the chair, staring out the window at the rain. "Sara," I said, my voice cracking. "Sara doesn't want me in her life anymore. I'm nothing to her, just an obligation. She didn't even want me at her baby shower, and when I overheard her talking about it, I realized just how much I've been fooling myself." Theta didn't say anything for a long moment, but I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, steady and calm. "Helen," she finally said, her voice firm, "you're not just someone's obligation. You're not some afterthought. You've given everything for Sara, and if she can't see that, then it's not your fault. You don't have to keep giving, especially if it's not being appreciated." I thought that when she had a child, maybe things would be different," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "I thought I'd get to be a part of her family again. I thought she would want me there." Theta sighed. "You can't control how people treat you, Helen. You've tried for so long, and it's not fair to keep hurting yourself in the process. You deserve better than this." I sat in silence for a moment, letting her words sink in. It was hard to hear, but it was the truth. I had spent so much time hoping for things to change, hoping for my daughter to finally see me, really see me, and appreciate what I had done. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go of that hope. "You're right," I said quietly. "I've given so much of myself, and it's like she never even noticed. I don't know if I can keep doing this, Theta. I don't know what else to give." "You don't have to give anything anymore," Theta replied softly. "You've done enough. Now it's time to take care of yourself." I let out a deep breath, feeling a small weight lift from my chest. Maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to stop trying to fit into a life where I wasn't wanted. Maybe it was time to walk away and start focusing on what I needed. For the first time in a long while, I felt the faintest spark of something. Something like hope. Not hope for my relationship with Sara, but hope for my own future, one where I could finally put myself first. "Thank you, Theta," I said, the words coming out more sincerely than I had intended. I needed to hear that. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "You're my best friend. I'm always here for you." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it. I wasn't alone. I wasn't worthless. I was still me. Helen Brooks, a woman who had been through a lot but had somehow survived it all. I ended the call, feeling the cool silence of my house settle around me again. But this time, it didn't feel quite so suffocating. I had a long road ahead of me, but maybe, just maybe, I could start walking it with my head held high. The next few days passed in a haze of quiet contemplation. I didn't call Sara, didn't respond to her texts, which were as perfunctory as they were frequent. I knew she was trying to patch things up, but there was a distance now that felt irreparable. I had spent so many years adjusting to her needs, to the rhythm of her life, but now I was just trying to breathe again in my own space. I needed time to process what had happened, time to understand what I wanted next. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up each day hoping for a message from her, hoping for an invitation or a moment of connection that felt real. I had been living for her approval, trying to fit into a mold she had long since cast for me. But now, I was starting to see things differently. The truth was there in the rain-soaked echoes of the baby shower. I wasn't just hurt. I was exhausted. Exhausted by the years of one-sided effort, by the constant giving without receiving, by the emotional manipulation disguised as family obligation. It had to stop. The phone rang again that morning, its shrill tone pulling me from my thoughts. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up and pressed it to my ear, expecting to hear Sara's voice. Still sweet, but laced with that familiar tension. But it wasn't Sara. Hello, Helen. It was Theta again, calling like she knew I needed a little nudge. Yes, Theta, I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. You still haven't spoken to her, have you? Theta asked gently. It wasn't a question, really. It was more of a statement, something I had already known, but hearing it aloud made me feel the weight of the truth. No, I replied quietly. I haven't, and I don't think I will. I think that's the right decision, Theta said without missing a beat. You've given so much. It's time you put yourself first, Helen. You've spent your whole life looking out for everyone else. Now it's your turn. Her words were like a balm to my bruised heart. She was right. It was my turn. For too long, I had been shrinking myself down, trying to fit into a role that never seemed to fit right. I had been the mother who would bend over backward to make everyone else comfortable, but it had come at the cost of my own happiness. And as much as I wanted to believe that Sara and I could somehow fix things, I couldn't keep ignoring the signs. She wasn't just ignoring me, she was using me, and I wasn't going to be used anymore. What do I do now? I asked, my voice small. How do I even begin? Well, Theta said, why don't you start by taking back control of your own life? I know you've been focused on fixing things with Sara, but maybe now it's time to fix things for yourself. You deserve to live your life for you, not as some afterthought in someone else's. I let her words sink in. Fix things for myself. It felt strange, almost foreign, but it also felt like the most liberating thing I could do. I didn't need Sara's approval. I didn't need her love if it came with strings attached, if it came with the expectation of constant sacrifice. I had already given too much. I wasn't going to keep pouring from an empty cup. I think I know what I need to do, I said slowly, a spark of determination igniting in my chest. I didn't need to wait for Sara to come to her senses. I needed to take control of my own life, to stop waiting around for someone who didn't see me for who I truly was. I had a life to live, and it wasn't going to be defined by the whims of my daughter or the manipulations of my son-in-law. That afternoon, I took a long, hard look at my finances. I had been the one to co-sign loans for Sara and Tom, always jumping in to help when they asked. I had helped them buy their house, helped pay for their vacations, helped with anything they wanted. But no more. I couldn't keep doing this. Not when I was the only one giving. I called my bank, feeling a surge of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. I need to remove myself from all the accounts I'm linked to, I told the representative. Everything, credit cards, loans, anything where my name is attached. Are you sure, Mrs. Brooks? The voice on the other end asked. These arrangements have been in place for a while. I'm sure, I said, a little firmer than I intended. It's time I take control of my own life." I could hear the representative pause for a moment, perhaps surprised by my certainty. But I didn't care. This was my decision, and I was sticking to it. As soon as I hung up, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be consequences, and I would have to deal with the fallout. But for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from the financial burdens I had carried for so long. Free from the emotional exhaustion that had kept me tethered to a relationship that had become toxic. The phone rang again, but this time it was Sara. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Mom, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice strained. I could tell she had been crying. "Please, can we talk?" I swallowed hard, my heart torn. But I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to be the same woman I had been. The woman who sacrificed everything for a daughter who couldn't even see her worth. It was time for me to speak my truth. "No, Sara," I said, my voice steady but firm. "We need to talk, but not in the way you think." "What does that mean?" she asked, a little defensively. "It means I'm done being your emotional punching bag," I said, feeling a surge of confidence. "I've been there for you. I've given you everything I have, and it's never been enough. It's time I take care of myself now. I'm not going to keep pretending things are okay when they aren't." "Mom, She cut herself off, and for a brief moment I thought I heard something like regret in her voice. But I didn't let it soften me. I couldn't. "I'm not going to be there when it's convenient for you anymore, Sara," I continued, my voice calm but resolute. "I'm done. You've used me, and I've let you. But not anymore. I'm taking my life back." There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what she would say. But when she finally spoke, her words were laced with a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. "Are you really going to do this?" she asked softly, her voice cracking. "Are you really going to walk away from me?" "I'm not walking away from you, Sara," I said, trying to keep my voice from breaking. "I'm walking away from the way you've treated me. And maybe that's the only way you'll ever learn to respect me." I hung up before she could say anything else, and for the first time in ages, I felt at peace. It was a small victory, but it was mine. I was finally standing up for myself, and I wasn't going to apologize for it. As I sat there in my living room, the rain outside began to lighten. The storm that had raged inside me was slowly clearing, and I could see the first glimpse of sunlight peeking through the clouds. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I was ready to walk it. I didn't expect things to get better overnight. After all, when you've spent decades shaping your life around someone else's needs, stepping away from that role isn't easy, and it certainly doesn't come without consequences. But what I didn't expect was the intensity of the fallout. It wasn't just Sara who would react. It was the whole system we'd built around our dysfunctional dynamic. The next few days felt like I was waiting for a storm that I knew was coming, but I wasn't sure how bad it would be. I stayed off the phone, kept my distance from the house, and went out for long walks. The house, which had once felt like a home, now felt like a battleground I didn't want to enter. Every phone call, every message from Sara felt like an emotional landmine, and I didn't know how much longer I could avoid the explosion. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the messages started flooding in. The first one came late that evening. It was a text from Sara. "Mom, we need to talk. You're making a huge mistake. Please, let's fix this. I don't know why you're doing this, but I can't believe you're just walking away." I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. I could feel the tension in my chest building. I knew that if I opened the floodgates of conversation with her, I might never get the space I needed. I needed to be strong now. This wasn't just about setting boundaries. It was about saving myself from a relationship that had been toxic for too long. "Sara, I'm not walking away from you. I'm walking away from a pattern that has been hurting me. You don't see it, but you've been using me for too long. I'm done being a fallback. I need space to breathe, to live without constantly being needed." I hit send and put the phone down, but not before my hands trembled with the reality of the words I had just typed. I knew it would hurt her, but I had to believe it was the only way she would ever learn, the only way I would ever learn to stop giving so much of myself. The next few days were filled with more texts, more calls, each one more desperate than the last. Sara seemed to be spiraling, her attempts at manipulating the situation more blatant. "I'm sorry, I know I've hurt you, but I need you, Mom. I can't do this without you. Please, you're going to miss out on your grandchild's life." Those words stung, and I wanted to cave. I wanted to be the mother who said, "It's okay, I forgive you," and just slide back into my old role, the one where I allowed her to take and take without giving anything back. But I couldn't. I felt my resolve harden. It wasn't about being a mother anymore. It was about being a person who deserved respect, a person who deserved love without strings. And I had to believe that if I didn't stand up for myself, no one would. When I finally picked up the phone, it wasn't Sara who called. It was Kent, the man who had been in the background for years, the one I never fully trusted but always tried to overlook. It was his voice that made my stomach churn as soon as I heard it. "Helen, we need to talk," he said in a tone that was far too calm, as if he were trying to sound reasonable, but I knew better. I could hear the underlying threat in his words. "You've really gone too far this time. You don't know how much damage you're doing. You're ruining everything." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "Kent," I said, my voice low but firm, "I've made my decision. This isn't about you or Sara anymore. I've spent my entire life making sure you two had everything you wanted. But no more. I'm not going to keep being a source of funding and emotional support while I'm treated like an afterthought. This is my life now." There was silence on the other end, and I could almost hear his jaw clenching. He was probably trying to calculate his next move, wondering how he could manipulate the situation to get his way. But I wasn't going to fall for it, not this time. "You're making a big mistake, Helen," he said finally. "You think you can just walk away from us, from your family, and everything will be fine? You're wrong. We need you, and we will make sure you know it." "Goodbye, Kent," I said, and ended the call before he could say anything else. I couldn't let him control the narrative anymore. I had to take back my power, and that meant not answering to anyone who thought they could use me. The fallout didn't stop there. The next day, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from a law firm, Kent's mother's lawyer, to be specific. The letter was cold, impersonal, and threatening. It outlined the loans and guarantees I had made on behalf of Sara and Kent, demanding that I reinstate my support or face legal consequences. I read the letter twice, my heart sinking with each word, but I wasn't afraid. This was it. The moment when I realized how deeply entangled I had been in their lives and how much I had allowed myself to be taken for granted. That evening, I called my lawyer. I explained everything, the loans, the guarantees, the manipulations, and she agreed that I had every right to remove myself from these obligations. "Helen," she said, "this is your money, your life, and your choice. They have no claim on you anymore." The weight I had been carrying for years began to lighten. I didn't want to fight, didn't want to drag this out in the courts, but I also knew I had to protect myself. I was no longer a safety net for Sara and Kent. I wasn't their bank, and I wasn't their emotional punching bag. As I hung up with the lawyer, I sat in the quiet of my living room, letting everything sink in. There was a part of me that mourned the loss of the dream I'd had for my family, a dream where Sara and I could be close, where I could be part of my grandchild's life. But there was also a part of me that knew this was the only way forward. I couldn't keep clinging to the past, hoping that things would change when they hadn't for so long. I had to face the truth. The phone rang again, but this time I didn't pick it up. I was done waiting for an apology or an explanation. I had done all I could. It was their turn now. I walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked garden. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light over the trees. For the first time in a long time, I felt the beginnings of something new. Peace, maybe, or hope. It was hard to tell. But whatever it was, it felt like a step forward. And that was enough for me. As I turned away from the window, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let guilt or obligation rule my life anymore. The consequences of my decisions would come, but they didn't matter. What mattered was that I was finally living for myself. And that was the most freeing thing I could do. Days turned into weeks, and the fallout from my decision to distance myself from Sara and Kent only deepened. The letters from their lawyer continued to pour in, each more threatening than the last. Kent, ever the master manipulator, started reaching out to mutual friends, trying to turn them against me. The accusations flew, each one more outlandish than the last. They painted me as the villain, the cold, heartless mother who had abandoned her own child in her time of need. It didn't surprise me, not really. I knew that when you finally set boundaries, people who had never respected them would try to push back. What did surprise me, though, was how many people sided with them. Friends I had known for years started sending me messages, asking me if I was sure about my decision, telling me that family was everything and that I should just forgive and forget. But what they didn't understand, what none of them seemed to understand, was that this wasn't about forgiveness. This was about respect. And I had spent years being disrespected, being used, all in the name of family. I was tired of being the one who always had to give, to bend, to make sacrifices for people who never appreciated it. It was in the midst of this storm that I reached my breaking point. One evening, as I was sitting in my kitchen, trying to figure out the best way to deal with the mounting pressure, I got a call from Zoe. Zoe, of all people. She had been one of Sara's best friends for years, and I'd always liked her. She'd been to my house for coffee countless times, and I had always thought of her as someone who would be there if I ever needed someone to talk to. "Hi, Helen," she said, her voice shaky. "I need to talk to you about something." My heart sank and I braced myself. I knew what was coming. "What is it, Zoe?" "It's about Sara," she said softly. "She's really upset, Helen. She's saying things I don't think you're hearing. I don't want to be caught in the middle, but I think you need to know what's going on." I felt a surge of frustration. "Zoe, I've heard enough. I know what's going on. I know that Sara is upset because I finally started standing up for myself. But what she doesn't seem to get is that I'm done being the doormat." "I know," Zoe said quickly. "But listen, Helen. Sara's pregnant, and she's really scared. She needs you. This baby. It's going to change everything, and she's afraid of losing you. You're the only family she has left who really understands her." I clenched my fists, holding back the tears that were threatening to break through. "Zoe, you don't get it. I've been there for Sara through everything. I've done everything I could for her, and all she's done is take, take, take. She never cared about me. She only cared about what I could do for her." There was silence on the other end of the line. For a moment I thought Zoe had hung up, but then she spoke again. "I know it's hard," she said quietly, "but I think you're both hurting. Maybe you should think about how you can rebuild this before it's too late." I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the chair. I was so tired. I was tired of being the one who always had to be the bigger person, the one who always had to forgive. I was tired of being the one who was expected to make everything better, while no one ever thought to ask how I was feeling. "I don't know if I can, Zoe," I said softly. "I've given so much to this family, and all I have left is a broken heart. I'm not sure I can keep doing this." Zoe's voice was gentle, understanding. "You don't have to keep giving, Helen, but maybe, just maybe, it's worth one more try." I didn't respond right away. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe that rebuilding things with Sara was possible, that maybe this time she would finally see me, finally understand what I had done for her. But the truth was, I wasn't sure. I didn't know if I could open myself up to that kind of hurt again. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I need time." Zoe didn't push. She just said goodbye and hung up, leaving me with my thoughts. I sat there in the quiet of my kitchen, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car driving by outside. The truth was, I was torn. There was a part of me that wanted to believe in the possibility of healing, in the idea that Sara and I could repair our relationship. But there was another part of me, the part that had been hurt for so long, that was afraid to let my guard down again, afraid that if I did, I'd end up right back in the same place I had been before, empty, exhausted, and used. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was still low in the sky, casting a soft golden glow through the window. For the first time in a while, I felt a small sense of peace. The storm wasn't over, but it was beginning to calm. I had made decisions, hard decisions, but I had to believe they were the right ones. I had always been the one to fix things, the one who smoothed over the rough edges and made everyone feel okay. But now, I wasn't sure that was enough. Maybe, for once, I needed to focus on fixing myself. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer again, asking her to begin the process of officially removing all my financial ties to Sara and Kent. It was a hard step, but it was necessary. This was about reclaiming my life. Later that day, I drove to the senior center. It was one of the few places I felt completely at peace. I spent the afternoon volunteering, helping a few new residents settle in, and listening to their stories. They, too, had gone through their own storms. Divorce, loss, betrayal. But they had learned how to rebuild. They had learned how to start over. As I helped one of the women organize her things, she smiled at me and said, "You know, Helen, I've been through a lot in my life, but I've learned one thing. You can't keep trying to fix people who aren't willing to fix themselves." Her words stuck with me long after I left the center that evening. I didn't need to fix Sara. I didn't need to be the one who always made everything better. What I needed to do was focus on myself. I needed to stop looking for approval from others and start believing in my own worth. I didn't know what the future held for Sara and me. I didn't know if we would ever have the kind of relationship I once dreamed of. But I did know one thing for certain. I would no longer let myself be defined by what others needed from me. It was time to put myself first. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of clarity. I was finally free. The weeks that followed were filled with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. I wasn't sure what to expect next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to allow myself to be pulled back into the toxic patterns that had defined my relationship with Sara. The lawyer had sent out the formal notifications, and the process of cutting my financial ties was well underway. The house felt quieter, the days longer, and for the first time in ages, I could hear myself think. I focused on filling my life with things that made me feel whole again. I rediscovered old hobbies I had pushed aside, like painting and gardening. I planted roses in the backyard, a flower that always reminded me of Harold. The scent of the blooms filled the air, and it brought a bittersweet peace, like I was finally reclaiming a part of myself that had been buried under years of giving. But even as I went about my days, the shadow of Sara's absence loomed over me. There were moments when I would catch myself reaching for the phone to call her, to ask how she was, or to share something small that had made me laugh. The impulse was still there, still buried deep, but every time I reached for the phone, I would remember why I had made this decision. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something I had done lightly, but it was something I had to do. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the porch, sipping a cup of tea, when I heard the familiar sound of tires crunching on gravel. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The sight of her car in my driveway had become a rare and almost mythical event, but today it was real. Sara. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I didn't move. I knew she was there, but I wasn't ready to face her. Not yet. She hadn't contacted me for weeks, not after the last conversation we'd had. I had expected her to be angry or hurt, or perhaps even indifferent, but I never expected her to come here. Not like this. The knock at the door echoed through the house. I took a deep breath, steeling myself before rising from my seat and walking slowly to the door. When I opened it, there she stood, looking as beautiful and fragile as ever, her hair falling in soft waves around her face, her eyes red from crying. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Can we talk?" I looked at her, standing there on my doorstep, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to pull her into my arms, to forgive her and pretend like nothing had changed. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt for so long, the part that had fought to take back control, knew this was my moment. I couldn't go back. Not now. "Come in," I said quietly, stepping aside to let her enter. We stood there for a moment, the silence thick between us. The past and the present collided in that space, and for the first time I realized how much I had changed. I wasn't the same woman who would drop everything for her. I wasn't the same woman who would beg for her love. "I'm sorry," Sara said as she sat down on the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I didn't know how to ask for help, and then everything with the baby and Kent. I've been so scared. I didn't know how to handle it, and I just pushed you away. I was afraid you were going to judge me or that you wouldn't understand." I listened, my hands resting in my lap. It was hard to hear her speak like this, so raw, so vulnerable. But I had to be honest with myself. She was still the same Sara, the same person who always expected me to fix things, to make them better. And for the first time in a long time, I could see that clearly. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now," I said quietly, my voice steady. "But I'm willing to try, not because I want to go back to what we had, but because I want something different. I can't keep giving to a relationship that doesn't value me, Sara. I've spent so many years pretending things were fine, and I've been hurt more than you know." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, and I could see the weight of my words landing on her. I had never spoken to her like this before. I had always been the one to smooth things over, to make excuses for her behavior, to swallow my pain for the sake of our relationship. But that day, something shifted. I wasn't afraid to speak my truth anymore, and I wasn't afraid to face the consequences of doing so. "I know I've hurt you," she whispered, "and I know I've taken you for granted. But I don't want to lose you, Mom. Please, please don't shut me out." I could feel the familiar pull of guilt in my chest, but this time, it didn't have the same power it used to. I wasn't going to let it control me anymore. I wasn't going to be the person who kept sacrificing herself for someone who didn't respect her. "I'm not shutting you out, Sara," I said softly. "But I need to know that you're willing to change. I need to know that you understand what you've done. I can't be the only one putting in the effort. I can't keep giving when there's nothing coming back." She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I'll change, Mom, I promise. I know I've made mistakes, but I'll work on it. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right between us." I didn't know if I could believe her. I didn't know if this was just another promise that would be broken. But for the first time, I didn't feel the need to rush. I didn't feel the need to make things right overnight. I was no longer looking for validation from her. I was no longer holding my breath, waiting for her love. "I'm not asking you to fix everything in one day," I said, standing up and walking toward the window. The rain had stopped, and the sunlight was beginning to peek through the clouds, casting a warm golden light on the garden. "What I'm asking for is honesty, respect, and the understanding that I'm not your emotional safety net anymore. If we're going to have a relationship, it's going to be a different one, and that starts with both of us." Sara stood up and walked toward me. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, her eyes searching mine. Then she took a step forward, her hands trembling, and for the first time in a long while, I saw her as the daughter I had once known. "I understand," she said quietly, "and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." I didn't know what the future held for us. I didn't know if we could rebuild what had been broken or if things would ever be the same. But in that moment, I realized something important. I had stopped waiting for Sara to change. I had stopped waiting for anyone to fix things for me. I was done being the one who always put others first. The sun was setting as we stood there, both of us unsure of what came next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. Not the kind of hope that clung to the past, but the kind that looked forward, that recognized that sometimes the most important thing you can do for a relationship is to set boundaries. And sometimes the only way forward is to start with yourself. I wasn't sure what would happen between us, but one thing was clear. I was finally standing up for myself. And that was a victory, no matter how small it seemed. We didn't have all the answers that day, but we had a chance to start again, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, things between Sara and me remained tense, but open. We didn't magically fix everything, and I didn't expect that we would. The past couldn't be undone, and the wounds we had inflicted on one another weren't going to heal overnight. But for the first time in years, I saw a small flicker of possibility. Sara was trying, at least, and for that, I was grateful. But trying was never enough for me. I needed consistency. I needed to see change, not just hear promises. I spent my days in a kind of limbo, not quite moving forward, but not looking back either. The small steps I had taken to reclaim my life felt like a distant memory, swallowed up by the weight of trying to figure out what kind of relationship I could have with my daughter going forward. The phone calls were more frequent now, but the conversations were awkward, filled with pauses and careful words, as if we were both still testing the waters. One afternoon, I found myself sitting in my garden, my hands busy with the familiar rhythm of pulling weeds from the flower beds. The weather had started to turn warmer, and the roses I had planted were finally beginning to bloom. It was a quiet, meditative kind of task, one that required no thought, just the feel of the soil beneath my hands and the soft hum of the breeze through the trees. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, expecting another message from Sara or one of her friends, trying to navigate this strange new reality we were creating. But it wasn't Sara. It was from Theta. "Helen, it's time. You've given so much to this family, and you've earned the right to take a step back. You're not a doormat, and you're not anyone's emotional crutch. I know this isn't easy, but you've earned your peace. Don't let anyone tell you differently." I read the message twice before I allowed myself to smile. Theta had been right. It had been hard, more difficult than I ever thought it would be. But I had made a choice. I had made the decision to take back my life. I wasn't going to be anyone's backup anymore. And the truth was, I didn't need validation from Sara or anyone else. I had lived for so many years, waiting for someone to appreciate what I was doing, only to realize that my worth didn't come from others. It came from me. Later that evening, I sat with a glass of wine, staring out at the backyard. The sun had dipped below the horizon and the stars were beginning to peek out. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly alone, but not in the way I had once feared. This kind of solitude was different. It wasn't a loneliness that weighed on me, but a freedom that I had never allowed myself to feel. I was no longer drowning in the expectations of others. I was finally and truly living for myself. Sara called again that night, her voice hesitant but softer than it had been in weeks. "Mom, I've been thinking," she began, the words coming out in a rush. "I know I haven't been the best daughter. I know I hurt you. And I'm really sorry. I've been seeing someone who's helping me understand why I've acted the way I have, and I want to do better. I want to show you that I can be the daughter you've always wanted." I was quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. It wasn't a perfect apology, and it didn't undo the years of pain, but it was something. It was more than I had heard from her in a long time. "I hear you, Sara," I said, my voice calm. "I appreciate that you're trying, but it's going to take more than words. It's going to take time. I need to see that you're truly committed to making changes, and that starts with respect for both of us." "I understand," she said, her voice tinged with guilt. "I'll show you, I promise." And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe her. Not fully, not yet. But there was a flicker of hope in me, a quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something, even if it wasn't what I had once imagined. It wouldn't be perfect, and it wouldn't be easy, but it would be ours. And that was enough. I hung up the phone, feeling a small sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead would still be long and uncertain, but I was ready to walk it. Not for Sara, not for anyone else, but for me. The months rolled by, and things between Sara and me slowly began to shift. It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, and it wasn't easy, but we learned how to navigate our new dynamic. It wasn't about me going back to being the mother who did everything for her. It wasn't about her becoming the perfect daughter. But somewhere in the quiet spaces between our conversations, I could feel a new kind of understanding growing between us. We both had work to do, but we were finally willing to do it. I focused more on myself. I took on new hobbies, traveled to places I had always wanted to see, and even started a small business selling homemade jams and baked goods at the local farmers market. I realized that I had spent so much of my life pouring everything into other people that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I hadn't allowed myself to dream in years, and it was time to change that. One afternoon, while I was selling my jams at the market, I saw Sara walking toward me. She had come alone, without Kent, without any of the pressure I had been so used to. She smiled shyly as she approached, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the field near her house. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, her voice warm but uncertain. "I thought I'd come see you. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to check in. I've been thinking about everything, and I'm proud of you. You've really changed, and I think I'm starting to see what you meant." I smiled at her, my heart swelling with something close to hope. "I'm proud of you too, Sara. I'm proud of us." She looked down at the flowers and then back up at me. "I don't know where we're going from here, but I want to keep trying. I want to build something real, Mom. No more pretending." It was a simple statement, but it meant everything. We didn't have all the answers, and we weren't going to fix everything overnight. But we had a chance now, a chance to build something better, something based on honesty and respect. As I watched her walk away, a quiet contentment settled over me. I didn't need her to be perfect, and she didn't need me to be perfect. All we needed was to be real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The sun was setting, casting a soft golden light over the market. The world was quiet, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, right here, in this moment with a future full of possibilities stretching out before me.